Is the alleged crime epidemic in places like San Francisco, Seattle, LA that's causing stores to flee, is that just actually bad management? Well, an investment bank says that's the case. This is what's going on. And you know what? I partially agree, and I've stated this why many times. Let's get into it. I'll tell you what they're saying. I'll tell you what I'm saying. Here we go. Just bad management. Never mind all the criminal drug addicts stealing from the stores. It's just bad management. You got management that they don't understand inventory control. They just don't get it. They don't understand. Well, there's some truth to that. For the last 3 years, shopkeepers across America have been up in arms about the alleged crime wave that's gripped the nation's cities. The National Retail Federation recently called for a federal crackdown on retail crime, saying retailers are seeing unprecedented levels of theft coupled with rampant crime in their stores, and the situation is only becoming more dire. Now, what I would say with that is, I think what is happening is you are seeing stores being impacted and closed that are having safety considerations. If you've got massive safety considerations and you've got a store that's underperforming and it doesn't really fit your current model, then boom, done, gone, right? And I've talked about that multiple times. Let's keep going. Major chains, including Walmart, Walgreens, and Target, I most notably recently covered the Target thing, right? Have blamed rising crime for their decisions to close retail locations, with Target most recently shuttering 9 stores across 5 cities. 2 of them here in Seattle, handful in Portland, handful in San Francisco, Bay Area, and 1 in New York City, in Harlem. And we've talked about this, and I have said, all right, the 2 in Seattle, they weren't the ones that had the most 911 calls. And that's a measure that we can kind of look at and go, all right, that is a quantifiable data point that we can go, all right, who had the most 911 calls? But I think another issue in there is who had the most violence happen at their store. And then you start layering that with, well, which stores do we know are working financially and which stores do we know that aren't? Now, you might not say, well, it's a small format store, we're going to close it for that reason. But you might say, well, this isn't meeting our corporate expectations. And we had this, and this safety issue happen. Therefore, moving forward, we don't feel comfortable having our store with the safety issues, keeping it open, impacting not only our potential shoppers, our customers, but our employees, our managers, all of our vendors, our security, anybody in the food chain. They're saying, we don't want something bad to happen to all these people. We care about our people. And in reality, well, it's because you got a little small store there and it ain't selling enough to cover the liability of having nut jobs from the community walk in and do crazy stuff. That's your bottom line. That's what I believe is happening. And you know what? This article kind of says that as well. So you got shuttering 9 stores across 5 cities. And the Seattle Times did a big article on this. And they're like, all right, so the 2 stores that I covered and we walked, I've got a boots on the ground video. If you want to check that out, you can look at that. What we did is we walked through both the University of Washington on the Avenue, that Target store, and then we walked through the Ballard store, and then we walked through the Ballard community, kind of showed you what a lot of the surrounding area was like. And it's tent city, and that area has been swept because it was so bad. They had a major event at the University of Washington nearby medical center. This is in Ballard area of just north of downtown Seattle. They had a major safety event and the city was called in to sweep out 47 tents that housed not only drug addicts, drug dealers, but human trafficking, stolen goods, drugs, you name it. It was in those tents, right? And then those people are stealing from the community store. And then you've got people from the tents many of them with mental issues, substance abuse issues. And so it's just not a good fit. So if you're already losing money, well, it's not a hard call to make. Closed. The actual increase in rates of theft seemingly does not necessarily correspond to the increase in company commentary and action, particularly one of more dramatic initiatives to thwart crime and store closures, they said. We have to acknowledge potentially ulterior, more opportunistic motives. You know what? If you've got a bunch of shenanigans going on in your community, I say it's fair game to close the store, whether that's shoplifting, community safety, whatever. There's no obligation for these corporations to keep these stores open. And if you have knuckleheaded governmental entities that are saying, let everybody live in tents, it's all going to be fine. We're just so compassionate towards our fellow human addict. We're just going to give them food, give them tents, give them tarps, we'll give them pipes, we'll give them clean needles, we'll give them tinfoil, we'll give them chapstick. None of those things are exaggerations, right? You got governmental entities here in the Pacific Northwest doing that all day long. So during the pandemic, product shrink, they put that in quotations, product shrink, the industry term for losses for any reason, including external and employee theft, product damage, or property errors, dropped rapidly as fewer people shopped in person and stores reduced hours and product selection. While theft has certainly risen since then, part of the recent increase in shrink is merely a return of pre-pandemic levels. More people out there, more people, percentage goes up of people that are going to shoplift. All right, so you got some of those numbers. Shrink as a portion of sales was 1.6% last year, the same as in 2019 and 2020, and up from 1.4% in 2021, according to the National Retail Federation. This year, William James estimated that shrink will make up a slightly higher portion, about 2%. That will mark a peak, the bank predicted, noting that there are early signs of stability shrink levels already in 2023. These numbers paint one picture. The other picture that you have is a whole bunch of people rushing in, 50 of them at a time, and overwhelming security and rushing out with as many Louis Vuitton bags as they can. We see that all time and time and time again. We see people backing trucks into stores, tearing out the ATM machine. We have stories about Seattle Fire Department. It is getting jacked all the time. Their jaws of life end up on Facebook stores being sold with Seattle Fire Department names still on the jaws of life equipment, and they use the jaws of life to pry open ATM machines. All this stuff is going on. So when you look at these percentages, 1.4, 1.6, they don't really paint that picture, do they? No. More broadly, in the post-pandemic economy, retailers are facing pressures from all sides. All right, that's true. You got inflation squeezed consumers are being pickier, people being pickier, while foot traffic in many downtowns is well below its pre-pandemic levels. We just had PCC, the co-op, has a big grocery store in downtown Seattle. They announced at the beginning of this week, right before Halloween, we're shutting that store down, and it had been open for 2 years. And they realized there's not enough people, there's not enough employees at the big companies in the downtown core to keep this grocery store open. So after PCC, after spending millions of dollars opening this store, it took less than 24 months for them to realize, hey, this store, we're not selling enough stuff. There's not enough people coming in here to buy stuff because the work week now is basically down to Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We know this for a fact because that is what Amazon requires their employees to be in office now, and a handful of other companies, including, I think, is it Microsoft or Meta, or it's kind of this rolling target, right? While foot traffic in many downtowns is well below its pre-pandemic levels, making retail in these formerly busy areas unsustainable. So if you've got unsustainable business and you got a bunch of nut jobs running around in your community, it makes it a pretty easy decision to say closed. And that's what I've talked about multiple times. And that is kind of my theory is, well, it's a combination of things. So while I agree with the premise of this article, it also has to do with safety features because this stuff is happening in cities that are predominantly Democrat run. And you got a bunch of liberals running around and allowing this kind of stuff to have happen because you're not seeing massive tent cities in Republican run cities. It's just not a thing. That's just not how it goes. Right? There isn't this sense of compassion to allow people to just shoot up and die of fentanyl, willy-nilly with all their shenanigans in the tent communities. Where at one time, I think people were like, let's just be compassionate. We'll give them a tent. We know that they're working hard to get back up on their feet. Well, instead, now we know that those tent communities are just a hotbed of crime. And it's the worst place you can imagine for any type of woman to be situated. Because they're just more and more stuff on that is coming out, specifically women and how they're treated within the tent encampments and how they are basically used as a commodity. Yeah, it's horrible. Target is one such example of talking about formerly busy areas unsustainable. Target is one such example, Woman Bear wrote. The Minneapolis-based chain has been vocal in its complaints about theft, most recently with plans to close 9 stores in New York, Portland, Seattle, and San Fran Bay Area. We cannot continue operating these stores because theft and organized retail crime are threatening the safety of our team and guests and contributing to unsustainable business performances. Target announced in September, despite investing in more surveillance and store guards, we continue to face fundamental challenges to operating these stores safely and successfully, the company said. All things said there are true. They are accurate. And that's why I walked through with my producer, Darian, and we walked through those stores and we're like, yep, all right, it's Target. Yep, all right. You got nut job outside standing there. He's crazy. Probably on some kind of drugs. He's talking about whatever. That's just right outside the store. You've got multiple security. Show that in the video. You've got multiple store employees walking around asking you if you need help. Hey, you need help? Unlocking all of our merchandise. Because any merchandise in these stores that's worth anything at all, it's under lock and key. It just is. That's how we're doing things. So this stuff talking about fundamental challenges is all true. However, what is being left out is that these stores also happen to be the small scale stores. Oh, they're not the big ones. They're not the big ones that sell all the goods that create the profits that make it worth taking the risk of having their employees, their customers, their management, their vendors keep these stores operational. Not worth the risk. Hey, we're not making enough money. Shut her down. It's an easy decision to make, but that's the kind of stuff that we're not seeing here and you're not going to hear about because that isn't a positive story. You're closing down because your corporate profits suck in those stores. Oh, okay. You're giving us you're giving us full truth. This information here is all true, but this is error by omission in my opinion. And you know what? It's totally legit. You don't have to disclose everything you want to. So many of these stores just say, yeah, we wish we could continue moving forward, but right now this doesn't work with our business model. Therefore, you can shop with us at these other stores slightly outside of the confines of downtown Portland, or join us online at target.com. We love to serve you there. Love to serve you there, right? That's how all the corporate speak goes. Actual crime statistics point to another culprit, however. Progressive newsletter Popular Information crunched the numbers last month and found that reported crime rates in the stores that closed were actually lower than at other nearby Targets, which remain open. Uh-oh, shenanigans. We've got shenanigans, folks. We've got shenanigans. What do we got going on here? That's what we're talking about, right? That's what we're talking about. And that is also true. The numbers that I read in the Seattle Times piece, like, yeah, okay. All right. Here's what you got going on. You got a store that's not profitable. Throw in a layer of safety issues, which clearly there are in the community. Target has every right to shut those stores down, and that's what's happening. William Blair suggested another possibility. Target could simply be closing unprofitable locations and conveniently blaming crime rather than bad business decisions. Maybe those were good business decisions at one time, and they really thought they were going to hit a niche, niche product, niche customer, whatever. And now, not so much. Small, we've realized small is no good. Bad business decisions. Evolving business decisions is what I would say. I mean, you could spin it as bad business decisions. Yep, that makes sense too. About 5 years ago, the chain, previously known for its sprawling complexes and suburban shopping centers, made a concerted push to have smaller format stores in city downtowns. But it hasn't publicly mentioned this as a strategy since 2020. Okay. And how big is the store in the university district that I looked at? Pretty small. 2 stories. 2-story store. Small. Yeah, it's not big. How big was the one in Ballard? Not big. Not big. It was not a big. It was a small store. How big was the one in Harlem? Yeah, it was, again, it was not a big store. It was smaller. So, right? There's also the ever-growing popularity of online shopping, which, while boosting retailers' bottom line, can take sales away from their physical locations, making them less profitable. That is true. But then it would be impacting the big scale stores as well. You know, when you go into a Target and you're like, all right, I'm in a Target. We've got McDonald's, we've got Wells Fargo, we've got Starbucks all inside the store. That's what I'm talking about. That's a big store, right? These stores didn't have any of that. They didn't have that. They had multiple security guards at the checkout, right? They had one way in, one way out. They've got it figured out. And they're not selling enough stuff. That's the bottom line, to keep taking the risk of being open in these locations. In fact, investment bank UBS expects online shopping to be a major factor in the closure of 50,000 retail locations over the next 5 years. So if you got a dog or two of stores, and you can throw out the fact of, well, yeah, I mean, look at the community. You got a bunch of nut jobs running around. Close those stores up. Nobody's the wiser. I think that's what's going on. Target could be using shrink to mask other issues, including poor inventory management, which came to a head in 2022 following supply chain disruption, and is now exiting underperforming stores to boost overall margins, William Blair wrote. Those big corporate is just screwing the consumer. This is business, folks. This is business. And if you steal from your community store, and if your community has allowed people to live in tents and just do all kinds of tent-like shenanigans, you may have your local Target shut down. That's just the hard reality. In other communities, that isn't happening. Weird. You know, the ones that are a little more red? Yeah, it's just such a strange phenomenon, isn't it? Yeah, it's weird. We believe companies like Target could indeed be using the current narrative around shrink to take broader action in lagging parts of their business. I think they are. I really do. Since the pandemic emptied out downtowns 3 years ago, plenty of stores have closed from a combination of fewer customers and higher rent. Remote work guru Nicholas Bloom estimated the typical office worker spending in downtowns has fallen as much as $4,600, saying the average worker in downtown is spending $4,600 less than they once were in their downtown community. That is what is impacting so much of this stuff. So stores are already struggling with that if they've got a presence in downtown. PCC, the grocery store I just talked about in downtown Seattle, that literally came out and said there's not enough people in downtown for us to make a go of it. This is dragging down our other stores that aren't in the low downtown location. We're going to close this one down. I mean, all they had to do is come right out and say, and they did very clearly, this is not financially feasible. Target has got other stuff going on. They've got multiple stores, multiple areas. And so we can kind of tell, all right, but yeah, those stores you're closing down, those are not the ones with the highest level of violence or with the highest number of 911 calls. What's going on here? Yeah, stuff is going on, right? But corporate has the right to do that. Yeah. Are they fully disclosing everything? Absolutely not. Do they ever? No, that's not their job. Their job is to bring as much money to their investors, shareholders, as possible, while still retaining whatever kind of consumer loyalty they can. Although Target, after that whole pouch in the crotch thing for kids' swimsuits, for babies' swimsuits, What in the F was that all about? Yeah, Pride Month gone sideways, right? Just kind of like the Bud Light with Dylan Mulvaney. What happened to Dylan Mulvaney? Where did Dylan Mulvaney go? Don't see a lot of Dylan these days, do you? Oh, no. We needed to disassociate ourselves from that because Bud Light dropped from being number one selling domestic beer. Now it's Modelo. Modelo! It's what we're doing. I really can't blame things after talking about keeping our consumer loyalty. Bud Light blew it big time. Target blew it big time. Hey, our diversity, equity, and inclusion score, it's going to skyrocket after we put these little pouch bathing suits out there and tell kids that whatever you got physically, you can work it out in our bathing suit. Come in and shop in our store. We're not weird or anything. And then Target turns around and says, no, too dangerous. Got to shut that store down. And we don't know what the real deal is. We won't ever know what the real deal is unless there's some scandal. And this isn't big enough news to have that make sense. You want to close the store down? You can close the store down. It's America, right? That's your call. That's your call. Nobody is obligated to keep these stores open. Oh, we've got a food desert. Well, that's because the constituents of your area are robbing the store blind and they chose to close it down. Oh, but where are we going to get our food? Figure it out. Yeah. It's where you sit. All right. That's it for me on this one. Thanks so much for being here. I hope all that made sense. Do you agree? Let me know in the comments. Catch up with you in the next one. Bye for now.